afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be watching us on Think Point Podcast with me, Ali Job. Today, I am deeply honored to welcome Melvin Robertson Roberts on my platform. Melvin is a very prominent Gambian lawyer, a public affairs commentator known for his strong voice on issues on justice, governance, and constitutional integrity in the Gambia. Through his legal experts or through his legal experience, he's been engaging in a very truthful discussion and conversation across the nation and beyond. Beyond the courtroom, Melvin played a vital role in shaping our public understanding on context, legal matters, often outspoken out of the issues related to human rights, judicial independence, accountability. Melvin, thank you so much for joining us on Think Point Podcast. It is a pleasure having you. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you so much, Honorable Ali Job. How are you doing? It's a privilege and honor to join your platform. Of course, your platform has been engaging in very robust discussions, very engaging and very educative. So it's an absolute honor to be part of your program, and I look forward to a very engaging discussion.
Thank you so much, Melvin. I am deeply honored to have you on this program. We have decided to do this yesterday, but due to some circumstances, we weren't able to come. I know the viewers, they might be disappointed with me, but I'm going to apologize them for that. Just to start with, I will just allow you to, um, uh, tell us or take us through your formative years in the Gambia as a young guy in Greater Banjul area. What kind of society were you brought up, and then what are some of the things that we were doing at a very early stage in the Gambia?
So basically, as you know, I am Gambian. Was born in the Gambia. I did my formative years and, of course, my education in Gambia, and then, of course, thereafter, um, immediately after I finished high school, I left for the United States. Lived there for a few years, and then, of course, returned back home to the Gambia. I'm a lawyer by profession, as you may know. Um, I also hold a Master's of Studies in International Law, Foreign Policy, and Diplomacy from the University of Oxford. Um, I'm a I am enrolled as a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of the Gambia. I also worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Corporations, and
Yeah, I believe he got interrupted by a call. It usually happens though. Do be with us. I believe he's going to join very soon.
can I? It's
Yeah,
as if somebody calls my phone, then it goes off.
yeah, I do understand. Yes, you can go ahead. Yeah.
So I don't know if is it okay to continue.
Yes, yes, I can hear you. You can go ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
you can
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes. So I work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And then, of course, I relocated to the United Kingdom, where I basically now live.
Wow,
So
that's incredible.
I write extensively, and as you may know, I am very much engaging in issues of politics, governance, law, and that is my passion. I do a lot of writings, a lot of blogs. I could say I'm a blogger when it comes to that area. So that's what I basically do.
That's incredible, Melvin. So before we get into the program, I will definitely allow you to go with the statement that you wanted to put up, and from there we can get into the substantial matters of today's discussion.
Yes. So basically, the topic basically sent to me by yourself was justice, public opinion, and power. Now, what I've tried to do was to just basically, based on my personal experience, based on research, and of course, the position of the law with regards to this very important and pivotal topic. This is a topic that is absolutely important in 2026, in today's world, because it is a topic that cuts across the heart of every single individual. And it is very important that we put it into context and we speak about it to bring clarity and to also look at the position of the law vis-a-vis what justice is all about and what should be our role as individual, as government, people in power, and as institutions that are wielded with such power. Now, the topic is justice, public opinion, and power. So, justice is not a popularity contest, it is a discipline, a process, and a principle rooted in fairness, evidence, and law. But in today's world, justice does not exist in a vacuum. It is constantly under pressure from two powerful forces: public opinion and power. Now, justice versus public opinion. Public opinion is loud, it is fast, it is emotional. Justice, on the other hand, is slow, is very careful, and it is evidence based. The danger arises when society begins to confuse allegation with guilt and noise with truth. I would say this again. The danger arises when society begins to confuse allegations with guilt and noise with truth. We're now living in an age where a person can be judged, condemned, and socially executed before ever stepping into a courtroom. That is not justice. That is trial by public opinion. Two, the influence of media and social media. The media was meant to inform, not to decide outcomes. Social media has now amplified this problem. Narratives spread faster than facts, emotions spread faster than evidence, and reputations can be damaged, destroyed in minutes. Once a narrative takes hold, even an acquittal in a court of law may not repair the damage. This is one of the greatest challenges to modern justice systems. Three, power and its role. Power shapes justice in subtle and sometimes very dangerous ways. Power can influence narratives, it can control access to platforms, and in some cases, it can tilt perception. But the rule of law demands that justice must remain blind to power. I will repeat that. The rule of law demands that justice must remain blind to power. Whether powerful or powerless, every person, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their creed, regardless of their gender, regardless of their position in society, is entitled to the presumption of innocence, a fair hearing, and protection from prejudice. Four, trial by public opinion versus due process. Due process is the backbone of justice. Due process says, let the evidence be tested. Let both sides be heard. And let a neutral court decide. Due process, I will repeat again, is the backbone of justice. Due process demands Let the evidence be tested. Let both sides be heard, and let a neutral court decide. Trial by public opinion says the opposite. Decide first, verify later, if at all, because it's not every time that we go back to verify. Once you're crucified, once social media has a particular narrative, that is the narrative that thrives. It is the narrative that gains traction. And most of the time, we don't go back to test the authenticity of this narrative, be it false or truth. However, once we abandon due process, we replace justice with chaos. We replace justice with anarchy, because due process, the rule of law, justice, fairness, equity has been abandoned for the noise that is loudest. And that is what social media has done. And that is what public opinion would do. Now, what is the role of institutions? Court, the legal systems, law enforcement exists to protect fairness, not to satisfy public anger. Their strength lies in their independence, in their neutrality, and their adherence to the rule of law. When institutions bend, crack, or fall under pressure in any of these, justice is weakened. If any institution falls in any of these, justice is weakened. Their strength lies in their independence. Their strength lies in their neutrality. Regardless what public opinion says, they must remain neutral. And their strength relies in the adherence of the rule of law. The rule of law must thrive. And if this is not so, then the institutions would weaken justice. What is the responsibility of citizens, the media, and leaders? Justice is not only the job of the courts. Citizens must resist rushing into judgment. Citizens must question the narratives. That is why God has granted each and every one of us the faculty to think, to analyze, to decipher between good and bad, between good and wrong, between bad and evil. Now, citizens must resist rushing to judgment. Citizens must question narratives. Citizens must respect due process. The media must report responsibly, avoid sensationalism, and remember that real lives are being affected. Leaders must defend institutions and not exploit public sentiment for gain. A society that convicts in the court of public opinion before the court of law is a society that risks condemning the innocent and weakening justice itself. Justice must not only be done, it must be done fairly, independently, and without fear or favor. Because the moment we allow noise to replace the law, we do not lose justice, we lose the very foundation of every civilized society. Over to you.
Deeply incredible, so touching. And then I think this has really informed the thought of a lot of people that are actually watching us. Melvin, thank you so much for that wonderful statement. Um, I would love to drag you back a bit, and then to start with, I will start with the statement given by Professor Sen. He said, in order to confront the culture of subservience, we must teach our young people or our children the to be very assertive and question authorities respectfully. And as a result, you're known for boldness, you're known for bravery, you're known for speak truth to the power. I wanted to ask you what informed these convictions of yours? Is it from the childhood level? Is it from the experience? Is it from the high school? where you come from. Take us through your conviction. When was it shaped into this direction?
So I'll give a story,
Mhm.
which is a real life story experience. I was about 7, 8 years old, and my grandmother had just passed away, and my mother and her sisters had visitors from abroad, from the United Kingdom, from England, and one of the guests was a lady called Auntie Gladys. I can't remember her last name. I know she's still alive. She still lives in the UK. She was a West Indian lady. Now, she came with a camera, and back then it was not things were not digitalized. So you had these cameras that were rolled on films that you would put into the camera, you will take pictures, then you will take it to be processed and the pictures printed out. So she came on a holiday and she left. Now I would go after school, I would go out, and there was and in Banjul, if you know Banjul, along Claxon Street, there was a photo processing shop right there, a studio. It was called Photo Star. So after school, we would go there and we would pick these printouts. They used to call them negatives. I don't know how they call them now. And we would pick these things and, just stand, pull them out, and, basically point them towards the sunlight. And you could see the image, just the image showing in those print. I used to love doing that. I would get out of school, would go there, we'll just do that, looking at different images and things like that. Now, I would take these homes and would be playing with it. So when this lady got back to England, she called my mom to say that somebody had stolen her camera from her purse. Because she had seen me with these negatives, this film, she said she was sure, she was certain that I had taken her camera and that the negatives I had in my hands were those that came from her camera. My mother, obviously, very strict, a disciplinarian, pounced on me. I had the beating of my life. That was the worst beating I ever had in my existence. The beating was so severe that to a point, my mother convinced me, because she hated someone lying. And because I kept denying and kept saying that, no, it's not it, the more beating I received. And at that point, eventually, because I was being beaten, it was unbearable. The pain was too much. It didn't seem that it was going to stop. I accepted and said, yes, I took her camera. And the negatives that I had collected from Photostar in Clarkson Street, I then told my mom were the negatives that came out of her camera. Couple of days after, my body was bruised, my body was sore. My auntie, and that's my mom's sister now. So this lady I told you was a West Indian lady who was a friend to my auntie. She's called Auntie Gladys something, lives somewhere in East London. Now, a couple of days after, my auntie who lived in the UK at the time called my mom. And while she was on the phone, she asked for me. And my mom said to her that I'm under punishment, that they've been beating me because I took Auntie Gladys's camera and destroyed it. Okay? And then my auntie now said to my mom, What? What are you talking about? What camera? And she said, Auntie Gladys's camera. And my aunt said, No. She said, When we went out, because my aunt was also on holidays in Gambia, but they had now returned back to England. And she said, When we went out, Auntie Gladys gave me her camera and I placed it in my bag and I forgot to give it to her. In fact, I was planning to ring her to tell her that her camera was in my bag. And this is after I had confessed to taking a camera that I never saw and never touched. And from that moment on, of course, my mom came back to me. And can you imagine what my mom asked me? Why did you lie? Why did you say you took it? And
Mhm.
of course, I said to her, but you forced me to say that. You told me that I should say that. And the beatings were not stopping, the punishments were not stopping. And that is, I always tell people this, and I say it with absolute pride. I am not the perfect person. I'm sure about that. But I can tell you one thing, I don't tell lies. I am not a perfect person. I'm sure I do make mistakes. I sure I'm human with my human frailty and human flaws. But one thing I always say with absolute pride is that I can defend my position any day, anytime, because as a matter of principle, as a matter of fact, I do not tell lies. And it all started from that day. Rather than tell a lie, I'll keep quiet. I will not say a word, but I will never tell a lie. And because of that, I have lived my life in a way, shape, and form that I will speak truth to anyone, regardless of the situation. If I know I am forced to lie, if I know I cannot be honest, I will stay quiet. But when I speak on any issue, regardless of the proximity, regardless of who is on the other end, I will speak the truth. I hate injustice of any form. And I have lived a life where I have been meted with my share of injustice. I still continue to fight to this day, against injustice against my person. And I will do so until the day I die.
Incredible, and that is something that all of us, have known you for. Somebody who has been very, very firm with his stance and what he does. Melvin, before we get into other matters, just wanted to drag your attention on the issues of your legal journey, and then of course your service when it comes to public service as well in the Gambia. You're somebody that has worked in legal fraternity in the Gambia before you moved to United Kingdom. Take us through. I mean, what was your experience? And then, at what point do you realize that, look, I wanted to go into legal firm. I wanted to go into legal field.
I can't tell you when exactly. I've always loved the feel of advocacy. I've always loved advocacy. I remember back in the days, again, I would make reference to my mom. She used to love watching some series, and she had books on a guy called Perry Mason. Perry Mason was a screen online fictional character that did kind of detective movies, like something equivalent to Inspector Derek. I don't know if you were watching Derek back then in GRTS. They used to show Derek, so it was like that. And from those early moments, I loved the art of advocacy, litigation, courtroom drama. But then I guess the passion to want to defend. I am a person that will defend my position. I will defend my position to the extent that I will make the truth bare. For you to go against that position, it will be two things. One would be dishonesty. Two, it will be complete evil. And three, it will be deception. But there is no way you will not be able to look at the evidence, to weigh the facts, and know that this is the truth. This is what is credible. And this is how I have lived my life. And people have asked me, where do you get the evidence? Why do you keep these receipts? Why do you keep these stuff? And I keep telling them, my life has been informed with conspiracy of lies and deception surrounding me. I always have to be on guard. So from a very early age, I love the art of justice, of fairness, of equity, of doing what is right and believing in what is right, regardless of who the person is, regardless of who the next character is. You don't have to be my friend for me to defend you. I will defend my enemy based on a position of truth, a position of equity, a position of fairness. And this is what I believed. I love the law. I'm passionate about the law. I read the law every day because the law evolves. And this is a constant mistake that is being made by individuals. Lawyers feel that once you have that degree, once you have the academic accolades and everything like that, that's it, it's done, it's done. No, that's not true. The law evolves constantly. The law is ever changing. The law revolves around society, around what is prevalent. So the law is not constant. It is an evolving discipline that every day there are new things, new principles. The law is given different interpretations every day. If you look at what is happening now, the United States is looking into the law of what defines a citizen of the United States. This would not have happened 20 years ago. It definitely would not have happened 100 years ago, because we all knew the definition was solidly behind the fact that you were born in the United States of America, you're therefore an American citizen. Donald Trump is saying a birthright citizenship is not citizenship. It's not law. It is not legal. So that is the law. So what the interpretation that was given to that law in 2025 is now being looked at by the Supreme Court of the United States in 2026. Who knows what the outcome might be? The Supreme Court, that is vested with the authority, with the power of interpretation, might just come out to say that it does not necessarily mean that everyone that is born in the United States is an American citizen. That is an evolvement of the law. So
Okay.
what might have appeared legal in 2025 would suddenly, based on the interpretation of the law, become illegal in 2026. What might have been law would not be law now. And that is why the law is a constant engagement. You cannot use the law to circumvent the truth. You cannot use the law for falsehood. You cannot use the law to mete out injustice against an innocent person. That is not what the law is there for.
Incredible. Incredible. So I wouldn't imagine, having Melvin being a doctor or an engineer, that us in the social sciences would have lost somebody of substance at some degree. So I believe that you have chosen a very right, I mean, the right field at that point. So Melvin, just to start the conversation proper, you are an inspiration figure to many of us, especially some of us who were in social sciences. Whenever you drop a write-up, we quickly ask each other, "Have you seen what Melvin have written?" I remember there was a time I was at Burfoot with my friend, and then I was trying to find a car to get to Tujaring at that time, and I saw your write-up. And as I was waiting on the car, I asked Lamin, "Have you seen what Melvin have written about this thing? Have you seen Melvin's opinion?" He told me no. And we were reading that for almost 30 minutes to 1 hour, trying to discuss about those points. That shows that how connected some of us were as far as your articles and your opinions are concerned when you come to social media. And I believe this is the story of so many individuals who admire you from far, and then they did not have opportunity to interact with you at that point. So moving forward, I want you to shed light on the current, how would you describe the current justice system in the Gambia?
Slow, very, very slow. It is evolving, things are changing, but justice in the Gambia is so slow to an extent that it looks as if it is non-existent. I know you're very familiar with the slogan "Justice delayed is
Justice done.
justice denied." The justice system in the Gambia is absolutely slow. It is so slow to a point that you would imagine that it is becoming redundant and obsolete. Justice cannot be slow to an extent that it is meting an injustice towards innocent citizens who cannot approach the courts, who cannot approach the law for issues of justice, issues of fairness, issues of truth, because sometimes it is better for you to let go than to explore justice within the confines of the court system, just because of how the courts are slow. Now, The other bit is about the independence of the judiciary. The judiciary, of course, from what we knew it back then to what it is today, we would say that the independence of the judiciary is being shown, it's being demonstrated. But we can also dare say there's still room for improvement. The way the court systems have been designed, it does not have sort of a supervisory authority that can look at the actions of the courts vis-a-vis the dispensation of justice, especially to the ordinary man. Justice is carved in such a way that for the poor innocent man, justice is far-fetched. To the poor innocent man, justice is unreachable. Justice is not accessible. And that is because of how the systems that have been put in place have carved what is an injustice and what is justice. Now, people have used the law. I, as an individual, at this moment that I'm speaking with you, I have approached the courts on a personal issue where I believe legal practitioners, lawyers, people who hold themselves as people of integrity, people of character, but otherwise have demonstrated and shown that this is nothing but false and an absolute farce. Because what they have tried to do is to use the law to met out an injustice. I'll give you a classic example. You go to court, you file a caveat in court. What is a caveat? It's a process in court that seeks to put the courts on notice that if a third party wants to perform a particular action or a particular act, I should be notified because I am an interested party. That is what a caveat is, the world all over. You file a caveat, and that is why caveats have expiration, they have a lifetime. You cannot file a caveat in infinity, perpetually. There's nothing like a perpetual caveat. You file a caveat to say that if honorable wants to take a particular action, I am an interested party, I would like to be notified. Please don't move unless I am notified. That is the principle. You don't file a caveat in court and then you clandestinely go to the courts, the same courts, to do a particular act when you feel that the caveat that you have filed would have stopped the individual from approaching the same courts to seek justice. That is using the law to circumvent the illicit act that you're doing based on dishonesty, based on fraud, based on what is not justice, what is not equity, and what is not fairness. We have seen people go to courts, approach the courts because they have money, they have the financial means to pay legal practitioners to defend their interests, knowing that innocent man that owns that land cannot go to court to defend the processes. We have a justice system in the Gambia where the average ordinary man does not understand the processes that are involved in the dispensation of justice, where people get away with things because of procedures, because of technicalities. But then when you go back and look at the very foundations of equity, you look at the very foundations of justice, you look at why common law evolved, you ask yourself, what then is justice?
Yeah.
Should justice be denied to you and me because I was unable to file a process in court within the 14-day stipulated time? Does that mean that an injustice should be meted out on me because I cannot fulfill a process, a technical process in court? Is that the dispensation of justice? However, this is what we are faced with in the Gambia. For example, in the United Kingdom, I can sit on my phone, I can have access to simple procedures where I can bring claims, I can bring actions through a single window justice delivery system where I do not even need a legal practitioner. I can go online, I can answer a few questions. Omar Malmo owes me $10. He took it from me on the 24th of January. I can file those processes. I can pay a little fee. Omar would be notified. His right to defense would be upheld. The process is accessible to the ordinary man. You don't need lawyers in wigs and gowns battling out in court an injustice, knowing that what they're defending in court is nothing but an absolute lie.
Yeah. That's
But justice have been made to be expensive, where justice dispensation is for the rich and injustice is for the poor.
that's touching. That's deeply touching. So, Melvin, I want you to walk us through. You don't have to answer this question, and I will try to be very careful a bit in asking this question. You've taken Gambia government to ECOWAS court, and at some degree, we have realized that rule of law has not been followed as per the ruling that we have made there. Walk us through. Why do you really think that Gambia government do not really adhere to those rulings that was made by ECOWAS court and High Court of the Gambia?
Again, it tells you a government that respects the rule of law, a government that believes in equity, a government that believes in fairness, and a government that prides itself in justice delivery, that is true, that is meant to be seen, would obey, would respect court judgments and orders. A government that does not do so, as far as I am concerned, and nobody can give it a different interpretation, is a government that is not willing to respect the law. It is a government that is selective in its justice delivery approach. They respect the law when it suits them, but yet still it is this same government that would go to court to take a person, an accused person, to court to seek justice. And when the courts deliver justice, they would respect the rule of the courts. They would respect the order of the court. Yes, I took the Gambia to the ECOWAS court. Up till today, justice and the government has not adhered to that, to the rulings of the ECOWAS court. But that is a second step far removed. I had taken the Gambia, I had taken the Inspector General of Police and the Attorney General to the High Court of the Gambia in a landmark ruling that I won, hands down. To this date, that judgment has not been respected by the state. What then can you tell me as an ordinary man, a lawyer, a man that understands processes and understands the law? The government does not have the willingness, does not have the appetite to respect court judgment. They don't even engage. And that is where power comes into play. Because these institutions that should respect the rule of law, that should respect court judgments, that should respect the authority of the judiciary, knowing that the judiciary makes up the three arms of government, that together they're in partnership through governance, but have decided that they would not respect it because that is what they want to do. Now, I have seen instances in the Gambia where government, the state, would respect court judgments only to make an agreement or to make a deal with the party responsible, where they would fist off the judgment sum that that person has been awarded by the courts. So everything then turns out to be kickbacks. And that is why when people ask me, why are you not supporting this government? My answer has always been consistent, and my answer has always been, I cannot support a government that is meting an injustice against me.
Yeah. Melvin, this will actually make us to have a conversation around some pending cases in the Gambia. You are a lawyer, so I know you know how to deal with this. You form an opinion with regards to the issues of, Usenu Boja and so many other cases in the Gambia. Uh, and a lot of people, are convinced at some degree that the prosecutors didn't do the needful in making sure that to present some evidences that might be really, meaningful for that case. What is your whole general perceptions about the issues of, state versus Usenu Bojang, the case that is about to be ruled? The ruling had been set for tomorrow, but I just want you to discuss a little bit about that.
Rather, it is not a perception. Rather, it is an understanding of what is. I have always consistently said this: you cannot manufacture evidence. Two things can be at play. You can have a system of adjudication that is not independent, it is not credible, it is not true, it is not fair, and it is not just. But in any case where all of these that I've just mentioned are present, you cannot, as a matter of fact, especially in a criminal case where the threshold is high, the burden of proof is beyond reasonable doubt. And people do not quite understand this burden. What the law is saying is that even if there is a shadow of doubt, even if there is a shred of doubt, you cannot convict. You're duty bound to discharge and acquit. The burden of proof is high because the law, justice puts a lot of there's a the threshold for the welfare, for the freedom of an individual is sacrosanct. There is an inherent right to freedom. You see, if you look at the world and how things have evolved, especially after slavery, after the Abolition Act, you would begin to understand why criminal law has involved, and it was formatted in such a way that the burden of proof is so high, the threshold is so high, it is beyond all reasonable doubt. Now, I am not talking of an instance where power is at play. I am not talking about an instance where a black man is convicted because of a white jury. I am not talking about an instance where a poor man is convicted because they cannot afford justice. I am talking about the legal evidential burden. Now, in all instances, going back to your question, it is not that the prosecution has failed, it is that the evidence have failed the prosecution in this case. The evidence has failed the prosecution woefully in the case of Usenu Bojang and Co. Because the evidence don't match the allegation of offense. The evidence of the prosecution do not match the crime that has been labeled against Usenu. And what has happened in court is that even where Usenu has not opened a defense, the prosecution's case vis-a-vis the evidence that was presented went against the prosecution itself because the doubts, the loopholes, the inconsistencies were solely based on the prosecution's case. It does not take a lawyer to have doubts. The fact that an ordinary man can listen to the facts of that case, can listen to the prosecution present its case and ask themselves, Mom la wala du mom. That is an element of doubt. The threshold for criminal prosecution and criminal conviction is beyond reasonable doubt. It's not even beyond doubt. Beyond doubt. It's not even, it says reasonable. What is reasonable? where a person can say, but these shoes, the boots that the police said did not fit Usenu. But you told me your Usenu's phone was being pinged, was being monitored. But all along, we just found out the phone was inside a drawer, in a cupboard, in a house. You said to me, Usenu was here, was there, was driving a car. You said to me, oh, the person that shot the gun, that shot the police officers were trained soldiers, people who had capabilities to handle ammunition, weapons. And it turned out this man was just an ordinary man. It is not the case of Usenu Dabo, Usenu Boja. The prosecution's case has caused inconsistencies to an ordinary man. And trust me, I have said this and I will say it again. If Usenu Bojang is found guilty at that high threshold of beyond reasonable doubt, I will never have anything to do with Gambia. I will deactivate every social media handle I have. I will never step foot in Gambia. I will be rid of myself with Gambia. I will never speak on the law. I will never speak on politics. I will never speak on governance or anything that has anything to do with the Republic of the Gambia ever again in my life.
Melvin, how did you feel when a woman like Usen's sister has been in incarceration for like 2 years? And he has a very he have a very minor that he is actually trying to that she is breastfeeding at some degree. I mean, as a lawyer, how do you see that at some level?
And that is what I told you about the injustice that is meted against innocent individuals or presumed innocent individuals by a justice system that is flawed, a justice system that is archaic, and a justice system that is not moving with the times. Now, to have an innocent person being kept in behind bars for up to 3 years for a crime that they did not commit is an injustice. Because you know why? There are people that would commit crimes that would be given 6 month sentences. They're guilty of the offense. But what has happened? An innocent lady, if it turns out that she is innocent by the judgment of the court of competent jurisdiction, it would mean that an innocent lady has been held behind bars, a lactating mother for up to 3 years. That is an injustice of the highest travesty, of the highest order. That people should go to bed not being able to sleep at night. I think it was Lord Denning who said that it is better for 100 guilty men to go free than one innocent man to go behind bars for a day for a crime they did not commit. But a justice system that would take 3 years to determine a matter, whilst that particular person is kept behind bars, it's not a justice system that is moving with the times. In the UK, I think it is only terrorist charges that people are denied bail for. But every crime, every offense is bailable. Most offenses are bailable.
Yeah, I just
Because
want to ask.
the presumption of innocence is absolutely redundant where you have kept a lactating mother behind bars for 3 years. That is not the presumption of innocence. That is the presumption of innocence have been butchered. It has been butchered. It has been made a mockery of. And it is not existence. And therefore, I think Gambian law should actually really evolve in a way that this bit about presumption of innocence should not even arise. That conversation should not arise because it does not exist by all
I
intents and
I
purposes.
wanted to ask you this question before we move to another topic. That has to do with if Usenu and the sister happens to be found not guilty tomorrow, how Gambia is going to project themselves in the eyes of the law at the global level. How the world is going to view Gambia.
I think as a matter of fact, if they are found not guilty, it would be a great dent on the credibility of the state. And this is because of the way and manner by which this offense and crime was played out in full public view for the unsuspecting Gambians. Because what happened in this case from very early on was an attempt to shape public opinion. And remember, in the beginning, every single person in Gambia was actually taking a position of identification of sympathy towards the deceased and their family and the state apparatus. Most definitively, the security apparatus. Now, because of the sort of information that was given out, that was played out in full public glare for people to see, and that is why we go in the start and the basis and the theme of this conversation, we see how public opinion can inform judgment, even where the evidence and the facts are like day and night. Now, if Usenu had not had the privilege of having a lawyer Lamin J. Dabo, or a Dr. Omar Malmo, or individuals that are ensuring that this matter is not dogged up and kept on and swept under the carpet, then Usenu Bojang and his sister would have been another statistic. If, for example, the public had not gone up in arms, I mean arms in this sense figuratively, in defense of Bob Keita, he would have been behind bars today, incarcerated for a crime he probably did not commit. But remember, there was a time also that public opinion was so much against him because of the narrative that was allowed to play out on social media. Thus, what we are seeing now is that the same social media, the same court of public opinion that was used to crucify, that was used to try, that was used to convict Usenu Bojang and his sister, is the same court of public opinion that is now eagerly waiting for Usenu Bojang to be declared a free man. But what then happens to a state that came out to play in full public view that they are certain that Usenu Bojang had killed those two police officers? And then it takes you to the next question. Who killed the police officers? And then it takes you to the third question. Why did the state security apparatus did not go against those individuals? Why did they choose to frame Usenu Bojang? Was it a coincidence? Was it a carefully orchestrated plan? Was it a strategic implant to frame an innocent person for a crime he did not commit? And then you begin to ask yourself the question, does it have a political undertone? And if it does have a political undertone, to what extent is the state involved? These are the questions. And if at all the state is then involved, you begin to ask the question, how safe are you in Gambia and how safe I am? Because the social contract that you have entered into between yourself and the state is to surrender part of your rights, to say that, you know what, I believe collectively we've come together. We've entered into a social contract between us and the government that they will protect me, my businesses, my properties, and there will be law and order and there will be security. But if at all it turns out to be different, and then you begin to ask yourself, what sort of contract have I entered into with the state, whereby the state is now framing an innocent man? And then you will ask the question, what and where is the overwhelming evidence against Usenu Bojang, and why was that evidence manufactured?
Yeah.
This is what we have, and this is what we're faced with.
Before I will allow Doctor to come in, to on his mic over there, I just want to ask you this question. You know, let's turn the conversation to the recent developments. The proposal media accreditation policy by the Ministry of Information or Communication, because they had a new name now. From a legal point or from a legal standpoint, do you see this as a step towards regulating professionalism, or could it be a risk limiting the press freedom and independent journalism in the Gambia?
It is a synchronization of both. The media has to be regulated. It's not every Dick, Tom, and Harry that should have the voice to make to report on matters that are not factually based. But also, on the other hand, you cannot stifle information and you cannot regulate the decimation of information in a society of 2026 and in a day and age of social media. So, what you should actually look at is the mischief behind the proposal. For every law, there is a mischief. Now, what the policy has not told us is the mischief behind the formulation of that policy. What are they trying to correct? In what manner are they trying to correct it by bringing out the accreditation of journalists? What is it that they're trying to mitigate? What is prevalent now that they're trying to correct? And that's why I say it's a synchronization of both. Where on one hand, accreditation is not a bad thing because responsible journalism must be encouraged. But not also must it be encouraged. There has to be liability. There has to be a process where people can be held responsible for their recklessness. Now, how do you do this in the absence of proper accreditation process? You cannot just have anyone holding themselves as a journalist. You cannot have people being adequately trained to report the news, to report court cases, to understand what their limitations are and what their responsibilities are correspondingly towards information to the society. But on the other hand, you also cannot use that as a weapon, as a tool to propagate a sort of autocratic state. So it is a fine line that must be looked at in a way as to what is the mischief being corrected and how is that being corrected and who would police the police, who would supervise that accreditation process in a way that the government cannot use it as a tool to suppress dissident. So that is how I view it.
That's incredible. I know we will delve more into it. Let me just allow Doc to come up, and then maybe he can say one or two things about most of the things that you have just said, and then he can put forward his question too. Doc, good to have you back. Doc, I can't hear you though. Um, yeah, I can't hear you. No, 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 no. We can't hear Doc for now. Maybe he's gonna log out and log in back. So Melvin, just to further questions with regards to the same topic that I'm asking, do you really think that state, I mean, particularly the Ministry of Information, should pioneer these policies? Should it be an independent, body like a media council or Gambia Press Union to come up with such position or framework than that of the minister?
I don't think if it is done in good faith, like I said, I don't see any reason why the Ministry of Information cannot do so. Because again, we need to understand something. It is not everything that we would wish to not come from the executive. Because that would be foolhardy, because we have given so much authority to the executive that there has to be a reasonable trust between the executive and society. You cannot say you don't trust the executive to regulate the media in such a way that is transparent, that is credible and legal, but then you say you trust the executive for your safety. Because remember, you are not going to guard yourself. You rely on the police for your safety. You rely on the courts to dispense justice. So civil society cannot usurp the powers of the executive. However, you need to also understand that the executive has a role to play in ensuring that there is trust between the citizenry and the executive. Where the citizens feel that the executive can use such policies to stifle dissent and to suppress dissidents, then that is a problem. And that is why I asked what sort of regime, what sort of mechanisms are in place to regulate and supervise the accreditation process to ensure that it is fact-based, it is equitable, it is just, and it is fair. That is what we should be talking about.
Incredible. Doc, I believe your mic is okay now. You can come up now, Doc.
You muted my mic. I'm not sure you opened it.
I
We
opened
can
it.
hear
You're
you.
good now. I can hear you now.
So what I? Hey Mel, what happened yesterday, man?
Dr. Omar Malmo, you okay?
How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. And yourself?
All right, man. Yeah.
But you can go ahead. You can throw set on what Mel has said, or from the beginning,
No,
give you a brief
I've not
overview.
heard all because I was into
So
multiple
he
things at
have
the same
delved
time.
he have delved into the issues of Usenu Bojang as today serve as the eve of the ruling, and then he discussed at length, and then of course we just discussing about the recent proposal from the Ministry of Information about the press accreditation that they wanted to put forward. Journalists believe that they have been suppressed at some degree. You can shed light on that, and then from there you can put your question to Mel if you have any.
Have a lot of light to set on some of those things. But I have just few questions on matters relating to the cap scaling and what the Ministry of Justice does. Mel is a lawyer and probably knows how that works. I would understand that the police, after their investigation, would give the Ministry of Justice some files to review and to determine or advise the police or the government on going to court on a matter or not. So we've seen in this particular instance, the DPP going to court with some informations that, in my view, very shameful to say, oh, the incriminating audio is lost, and just for the defense to bring you the audio and for the prosecution to vehemently, fight tooth and nail, trying to deny the admissibility of the audio in which you actually arrested the suspect. What are the bases on which the Ministry of Justice is expected to determine substances within a case as per going to court or not? It's just any file that comes, they just decide over it, or it has to undergo certain processes and procedures, and of course determinations within to actually give that legal opinion or advice to go to court or not.
So basically, the world all over, the basis of any criminal prosecution should solely be on the weight of the evidence. It should solely be on the belief and the assumption that the prosecution can secure a conviction. That is the basis, that is the threshold that the Justice Ministry must follow according to law. Now, the question is, what's going on? Okay. We just stalled for a minute. I don't know what happened. I can't hear you guys anymore.
You can go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay.
All right.
So that is the basis. Now, what we need to look at, and a topic I have spoken about, is why must the police, where in the law And I've continually asked this, and Dr. Omar, if you can remember during the Bob Keita trial, I had consistently spoken about this. Where is the law in the Gambia that says the police must forward a case file to the Attorney General to make an informed decision on prosecuting a matter or an indictment in court? Where is the law? Can the Ministry of Justice show us the law? Can any lawyer in the Gambia show us the law? The Ministry of Justice does not have investigatory powers. They don't have it. And that is the issue we had when the National Assembly made a recommendation that Batambedu should be criminally charged, criminally liable, and be charged with economic crime. Because what has happened is that the National Assembly had decided to give themselves investigatory powers that they do not possess. Because for you to bring a criminal charge, there must have been an investigation. It is on the basis of that investigation that a person can be charged. So if at all the police that has got the human resources, the capabilities, they have got the manpower, they have got every single resources at their disposal to investigate. But not only that, they have been given that authority by law. Why then would the police subject themselves to state councils at the Ministry of Justice with no investigative powers to determine what matter should proceed in court on the basis of an investigation? Now let me take you back. Let me take you back and give you a historical perspective of what was. Remember, there was a time when the police was made up mostly of school dropouts. And therefore, the police, even though had investigatory powers, did not have the legal acumen to vis-a-vis put the facts together, contrast it with the law, and be able to make a determinant of what law has been broken and what has reached a threshold of criminal culpability. And because of that, and the evolvement of the 22 years regime of Jammeh, where the state would deem to determine what matters must be prosecuted and which matters must not, the police, in trying to shift the buck of responsibility from themselves to another party, would take a whole case file that they have investigated. Because they do not want to take that responsibility upon themselves, that they are the ones that have brought a criminal charge, or they are the ones that have refused a criminal prosecution, they send that case file to the Ministry of Justice. And what would happen then is that the responsibility shifts from the police to the Justice Ministry, which is part of the executive. So when it goes to State House and Jammeh presides over it, the person that is liable would be the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, not the Inspector General of Police. That is how that issue evolved. But circumstances in 2026 are radically different, because the police have they have the capabilities, they have the capacity, they have highly trained individuals, they have seasoned lawyers with vast experience that can determine whether a matter can be prosecuted based on the facts, based on the evidence,
Again,
and the
again,
law.
again, that speaks to one thing. We have seen the police prosecution office where all the personnel there are trained lawyers. Now, these are all trained lawyers that compose of the prosecution unit of the Gambia Police Force. Having investigators investigate a matter, probably send it to the police prosecution, and that would have reviewed it, and also took a second level of getting it to the Ministry of Justice, and justice determining that of course we need to go to court, and then going to court just to turn around and say, oh no, this particular material is lost, just for the defense to bring you out and to publicly shame you in an open court like that. What exactly are we getting wrong
And that is where, and that is what I tried to explain. Because remember, the custodian of the investigation is the police.
Right.
The Ministry of Justice does not have investigatory powers.
Right.
The state councils at the Ministry of Justice do zero when it comes to investigation. They look at the law. And what do they look at the law by? You just don't look at the law in abstract. You have to contrast the law with the facts on the basis of the investigation and the evidence accompanying the facts that has been presented. Now, if the facts are, there is an audio, there is a confession, there is a phone that is being tracked, it's pinning in area A, area B, there are coordinates here and there. That is the evidence that they look at, which is an evidence based on writing, based on a police report. And what they do is they look at the law. Now, the question you should ask yourself, and I should ask myself, and knowing how the Ministry of Justice operates, is there any time that the Ministry of Justice will sit to listen to those audio? Is there any time that the Ministry of Justice will sit to verify the coordinates that the police have mentioned? Is there any time that the Ministry of Justice would look at the call logs, would compare the messages, would look at coordinates? Is there any time? No, they don't do that. What do they look at? What is on paper? I have spent time at the Ministry of Justice under the Director of Public Prosecution, Hadi Bakun, at that time. And I can tell you, how do you write legal opinions? It is based on what the police have given you. Now you go to court, only for you to get to court, and you begin to realize when the evidence is being tested that, boy, I should have listened to that audio. And then you begin to say that audio is lost. That is a prosecutor who's trying to win his case. And that is why before you came in, I mentioned, in the case of Usenu Bojang, it is not the defense's evidence that would acquit and discharge him. It is the loopholes in the prosecution's evidence. The evidence of the prosecution spoke against the prosecution. The evidence of the prosecution spoke against the fact that Usenu Bojang is not the person that killed those police officers. Usenu Bojang could have shut his mouth in court, do not present any defense. If the state, if the court, if the judge, if the court has not asked him to open a defense, because the defense, the prosecution's own defense, what they rely on was not in existence. You relied on a mobile phone as your most prized piece of evidence, only for you to go to court and you realize that phone was formatted. Now, the question that me and you should be asking is, did the state prosecutors at the Ministry of Justice determine that that phone was open to look at the evidence and see whether that was a piece of crucial evidence that must be tested in court and that must be put before the court and to be admitted in court? From the look of the case, you can tell that all the thinking that the prosecutors did was after the fact. And therefore, you could have an issue where an audio that the prosecution was relying on, that they claim to have been lost, and is now being presented by the evidence, by the defense. Remember, this was their evidence that they were relying on. They ordinarily should have admitted it into evidence in proving their case. But suddenly it got lost. Now the defense, in aid of them, it's like the defense is helping them. You lost your evidence to prosecute. You lost your evidence to prove your own case. I will give you the evidence. And then you hear the prosecution now saying, we don't want the evidence. That evidence, you cannot bring it in this court. That is ludicrous. That is something you don't see in modern day prosecution, because the prosecution also have a duty to speak the truth. The prosecution have a duty to dispense justice fairly and equitably. The prosecution is not there to frame an innocent man. That is not what they're there for. So again, you ask yourself the question, a ministry of justice that has got no investigatory powers, how can they investigate and determine something? So now, if you ask yourself the question, who has the bulk of the responsibility? It is the police. Is it the police or the Ministry of Justice? The police would always tell you that all we did was send our case file to the Ministry of Justice. They determine whether charges should be brought. They determine whether they should file an indictment on Usenu Bojang and Co. or not. It is not the police that went to defend that matter. The police did not go to prosecute Usenu Bojang. It is the state law office that did. And therefore, you see how the shifting of the buck and the responsibility now lies squarely on the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General's chambers. But then it goes again to ask yourself, you have to ask yourself the question, what is the aim of the state law office? And that is where all the theories after tomorrow's judgment would begin to make sense. And that is why I think tomorrow, like I said, I wanted to deactivate my Facebook for the whole Holy Week. But I feel that tomorrow there has to be a robust analysis on that judgment. Because you would then begin to ask questions that comes after the fact, after the determination of that case. Because remember, the Attorney General sits as a cabinet minister. So you're asking the question, when he gave the authority for the DPP, because the DPP would not have gone to court without the assurance and authority and green light from the Attorney General. Did he sit and do that in his capacity as the Attorney General or the Minister of Justice? And then you begin to ask yourself, why did the executive, because the police is part of the executive, why did the executive decide to frame an innocent man on a crime that he did not commit? Were they aware? You begin to draw a nexus between the conspiracy theories. What was the reason for the press release? What was the reason for the spokesperson of the government to come out on a criminal matter that was being investigated on its first and second day? What was the rationale for giving out such sensitive information on a matter that was just being investigated? What was the reason for giving out on a press release most sensitive issues such as coordinates of phones? What was the reason? And then you ask yourself, does the Minister of Justice sit in cabinet? When he endorsed the prosecution of Usenu Bojang, was that what role was he at? What hat was he wearing? And then you begin to ask yourself the question, is there a murderer on the loose? And if there is a murderer on the loose, why was the focus not on the individuals that would have been responsible for killing the police officers? Why was it diverted to an innocent man and his sister?
Now you just mentioned his sister. I have this follow-up question. The sister was initially, detained with men in the same cell, and in court, she explicitly said that she was denied even prayers and was kept in the same cell for a week with men. What's basically what's legal about that? Or what's exactly illegal about that? What has the law said on that?
There's nothing legal about that, and she will get redress in our courts, and if she doesn't find it in our court, she can approach the ECOWAS court. That is a grave violation of a fundamental human rights. Even whereas she is guilty, she still has to have her fundamental human rights respected. You cannot, under no circumstances, keep a female detainee in the same cell as male detainees. That's inhumane. Under no circumstances must you deny a person prayers. On what grounds? On what basis? And that is why before you came in, I talked about the presumption of innocence in Gambian justice delivery system. It's just on paper. Because a person that has not been convicted by a court of competent jurisdiction, you've denied that person the right to prayer. You have already found that person guilty. You have convicted that person. So what is the basis of the presumption of innocence until proven guilty? You've kept that person behind bars for 3 years. You've taken the best part of that person's life. After 3 years in detention, you have caused that person to have memories, to have an emotional mental state that can never ever be taken away. No form of reparations whatsoever can put that person back to the original position. Why must the sister? And that is why when you go back again and look at the law, what is prima facie evidence? And that is why I think to some extent the law is not present in Gambia. What is prima facie evidence? Can someone tell me what is the prima facie evidence that was established against the sister of Usenu Boja? On what basis was that woman indicted? What was the evidence against that woman? Was that evidence tested even before by the investigators? Was it tested by the Ministry of Justice before that indictment was filed? Did the evidence and confession of Usenu Boja, did it go a tandem with the prima facie evidence that they had against that woman? There was nothing there. Everything that we saw played out in open court was an inconsistency. Where was the conspiracy between Usenu and the sister? And then it goes to ask yourself, do we have real justice in Gambia? What would have happened if Usenu Bojang did not have a Dr. Omar Malmo? What would have happened if Usenu Bojang did not have a Keksane who was writing or reporting on the matter? What would have happened if Usenu Bojang did not have a lawyer Laminje Dabo? Do you know how expensive it is to defend yourself against a criminal charge? What would have happened? What would have happened if lawyer Lamunje Dabo was not a seasoned legal practitioner that could circumvent all the procedures and technicalities and objections raised by the prosecution? This is the first case in Gambia's history that I am aware of, that I know, where the prosecution is fighting against their evidence that they initially relied on to prosecute. But we wait to see what the judgment would say tomorrow. And I did say, and I did explain in the beginning, which is the cross between public opinion, between justice and power. And we can see all of this at play in this case. What is justice in this case? How has power contributed to the prosecution of Usenu Boja? And how has public opinion shaped the initial charge against this man? The same public opinion that overwhelmingly believed in the press release of the police. It is the same public that is now waiting in bated breath for the judgment of Justice Jaite come tomorrow.
Incredible contribution down there. Doc, do you have a further question? Because when I intend to invite Melvin, I crafted the topic, and then there could be any other person to have a discussion with regards to the issue of the subject matter other than you, Mel. Mel, I want us to make a progress now to the third topic of our today's discussion. You've spoken highly about Ami Bensouda during the investigations about the National Assembly Selected Committee to look into Jambe's asset, and Ami came out without any severe or without any recommendation attached to her. You seems to be how to call it you seems to be, I don't know which adjective I would use, proven right as per the reports of the commission. Why were you very conversant that Ami Bensouda integrity was intact when you were trying to make your analysis at some degree?
Okay. One, I did not come up with I did not take a position in oblivion.
Mhm.
Like I said in the beginning, if I believe that Ami Bensouda was culpable, even with my support of Talib Bensouda, and my close proximity to the Unite Party, I would have kept my mouth shut. I would have spoken about other things. I would have spoken about things political. I would have spoken about Unite. I would have spoken about the movement. I would have spoken about Tali Bensouda and keep my mouth absolutely shut when it comes to Ami Bensouda. But I can also tell you that I have dealt with Ami Bensouda in close proximity. And I know the woman to be a person of integrity, an absolute person of integrity, substance, and somebody who would not ordinarily, it would have been the most shocking thing to me to see that the National Assembly Select Committee would come out with an adverse finding against Ami Bensouda when it comes to things of the law and how she handled things, especially financial matters and things of legality. This is a woman who I am not. Listen, she's human. She's bound to make mistakes. I've seen people say that, but she worked with Jame. She drafted the decrees. Who would not have drafted a decree at that point when you were Attorney General and Minister of Justice? I would have done it. You are a cabinet minister. Who is your principal? It is the head of state. It is the head of state. Are people not drafting policies now on the barrow? Some of these policies are to the advantage of the incumbent, but you are part of the government. You share in their views, you share in their policies. Now, that does not mean that she is not human. She is bound to make mistakes. But if you want to tell me that Ami Bensouda is a dishonest person, I would put my life on the line to say that she's not. The woman has got no dishonesty in her bone, in her DNA. This is an accomplished lawyer who started from very humble beginnings and grew her legal empire to what it is today by dint of sheer hard work, diligence, honesty. If you talk to me about an Ida Drame, I would lay my life down and say there is no dishonest bone in her. I walked with her. I walked in close proximity with her. I know how she operates. I know what she does. She would never involve herself in anything that's dishonest. She would never involve herself in anything of illegality of any manner and form. There are people I know. So I was glad that I was vindicated when the National Assembly Select Committee report came out, and it upheld my earlier position that I have robustly defended, that she was a woman beyond reproach, a woman that cannot be soiled.
Yeah, so that was the word I wanted to use, and I'm being vindicated at some degree. And then this is not the first time. In many cases, if you make an opinions about certain issues due to your balanced opinion with regards to issues related to national issues, are always upheld. Doc, do you have a question for him?
No, on that matter, we've had several discussions with Melville on the commission and related items, generally. But now would be my question is mostly focused on what's happening tomorrow, because that's to me much more important. Uh, what should we expect in all aspects, in all possibilities, and thereafter, what exactly does this hold for the Gambia?
Like I said earlier before you came, the law is not static.
Yeah.
The law lives. The law thrives in justice, equity, fairness, and weighing of the evidence in an unbiased manner. There is no legal manipulation or there is nothing, as far as this case has presented, that meets the evidential burden, that meets the threshold of criminal liability in a criminal matter of beyond reasonable doubt. Every single Gambian, every single person that has had this case have formed some reasonable doubt in their mind about this matter. So even when you weigh the evidence and know that the evidence are not a tandem with the crime and the offense with regards to the person concerned, take that aside. The fact that every single person is having doubts. Oh, if that boots does not fit Usenu, does it belong to him? That's an element of doubt that the courts, the law cannot circumvent.
Actually, the brother came to court and claimed ownership of the shoes.
Even if the brother had not come to court, O.J. Simpson's brother did not go to court to say the gloves fitted him. The glove did not fit. And the law is, if it does not fit, you must acquit. Nobody can change this. Not Justice Jaite, not the court system in the Gambia, not anyone. Because justice would not only be seen to be done, justice has to live in this case. And the irony of this case is that when justice is dispensed in a fair, upright, and just manner, the state has a lot of answers. And there, from my own perspective, that is where it begins. Who killed the cops will become a slogan in Gambia's justice delivery system. Because then it mattered. Because then you have a killer out there. You have a murderer out there. And then you begin to ask the questions. Why did the investigations go in the way and manner it went? Who was protecting who? Why did the state decide to go after an innocent man and let a guilty man go scot-free?
Just opinion of that. Beyond a lawyer, you're quite a very seasoned diplomat, and I've interacted with a lot of people around the world, understand geopolitics and all of it. I have taken the initiative to write to a lot of international organizations, foreign governments on this matter. And the responses we got is like, we are paying attention to this case. Some of them got embassies in the Gambia. Of course, we are paying close attention to this case. With tomorrow's long, awaited judgment, what does this hold for Gambia and its international partners, and of course, people that support the government of the Gambia, from different walks of life, from international organizations, and as well foreign, diplomats and foreign governments.
The thing is, you need to understand that governments are viewed through the lens and the eyes of international organizations. The brand of your country is not for the inhabitants of that country. The brand is to the outside world. Now, when two police officers are murdered in broad daylight, and the state decides to come out with with a very huge press release, and not only a press release, the government spokesperson joined in that path to propagate an agenda and a narrative that has turned out to be false. The question would then be asked, is the state culpable? That's the first thing the international organizations would ask. What has the state got to hide? And if the state is hiding, is it the state that has meted out this crime against those innocent police officers? International organizations would watch And the Gambia's index would be judged and assessed by this case. Its human rights index, taking a presumed innocent woman, a lactating mother, putting her in the same cell as male arrestees, denying her the right to pray, would be a dent in the Barrow's government in ensuring that the rule of law is upheld. Two, the international organizations are watching this case because they want to know whether Gambia is slipping into dictatorship or whether the Gambia is thriving in the democracy that was claimed in 2016. How did we manage to metamorphose from 2016 with the banner of goodwill and democratic ideals and respect for the rule of law to a moment where the state would fight tooth and nail against their own evidence, which was the basis and foundational cause to indict an innocent man? The audio, the mobile phone, the confessions allegedly. And you ask yourself the questions that I have asked before. Why were those two innocent men hurriedly buried? What sort of postmortem was done? Why were ballistic experts, ammunition experts, why were pathologists not invited from other jurisdictions to ensure that justice was done? And not only done, but be seen to be done by the ordinary Gambians. And the question again would arise: if Usenu Bojang is indeed innocent, who killed the cops? What reason was there to kill those individuals? And then you will ask the question, is the state culpable? Who polices the state? Who supervises the state? Why was a bounty given on the death of those two security officers? You will ask the question, why was Mama Jabi the recipient of that bounty? Why was Mama Jabi seen in the presence of the state apparatus, most predominantly the NPP? And you will ask yourself the question, again, an innocent man gave a confession to a prominent party stalwart, a party who is the incumbent and ruling in government. Was that a mistake? Was that a coincidence? The questions will be asked. The analysis will be done. And answers, if not today, will come out tomorrow. And the facts will be known.
I want to inject a little bit of the politics that were injected into this case since the beginning. We were told that Usenu Bojang is a member of a political party and he works in Brikama Area Council and he was at the UDP court case in Banjul and he was there with the gun and of course he was paid by politicians to kill, who after met him in a mosque and provided him an escape vehicle into the thick forest of Casamas. He's a guy in hoodie. What does UDP have to take or not to at the end of this case?
The fact is, UDP had a lot to take before the end of this case because the facts have already been established that the conspiracy theories that was established and surrounding the UDP has proven to be false, even before the determinant of the case by the court of competent jurisdiction. The mere fact that the government spokesperson can come out to say that he was misled is enough grounds for the UDP to take this matter to whatever stage they want to. Because they have been exonerated by the very fact that the government spokesperson himself has come out to say he was misled. What you say in a diplomatic language that I was misled is that I had lied. I lied. But the lying was because of the information that was given to me.
Right. And the givers of the information claim responsibility of the
And the
information.
givers of the information claim responsibility. Now, what we have not asked, and the second tier to that responsibility, is why did they give and mislead the government spokesperson? Because if the government spokesperson is now coming out to say, I was misled, and now the authority that's misled the government spokesperson has taken responsibility to say, yes, we misled, the next question to be answered and determined is, why did you mislead? Did you mislead deliberately? Or did you mislead because you also was misled? Now, who misled you? Is it your ignorance of the facts? Were you misled because of lack of capacity? Or were you misled by a political undertone that created the president to offer a bounty? That was the recipient of that bounty became a right-hand person of the president. Are these narratives all some sort of what's the right word to use? Were they did it all happen in, it's just coincidences? Was it a carefully orchestrated plan? Did that what who in fact conspiracy theorists would say that $1 million was a photo op that probably Mama Jabi had returned it back to where it came from? But the question to be asked is, why would Mama Jabi decide to frame an individual that is a serious NPP stalwart in an initial conspiracy that was pinned on the largest opposition party in that country? When that confession allegedly came out, the conspiracy theory was that it was a UDP matter. And that is why you could see the prominent involvement of an NPP individual. So you cannot divorce the political undertone to the killings of the cop, even where it is not present. It is very significant to an extent that it would cause an ordinary person to think outside the box. And that is where we stand. And I'm hoping that the judgment of Justice Jaite will not be only an acquittal and discharge judgment. I want to see Justice Jaite delve into the weight of the evidence that was presented in court. I look forward to seeing the inconsistencies of the evidences that was played out in court. And finally, I want to see Justice Jaite put weight on the evidence of the defense in showing and proving the innocence of Usenu Boja. Anything short of that would not do justice to this matter. And I trust Justice Jaite to really give us something that is meaty, something that can be discussed for years to come, and something that would be a revolution to criminal justice delivery system in the Gambia, where people would know and understand that you just don't get up and take somebody to court because you have the power, because you have the authority, and because you have the means. No matter how erroneous, no matter how flawed, no matter how badly put, no matter the political undertone, the basis of every criminal prosecution must squarely be on the evidence. And I expect that this judgment would be a revolution where it would turn out, it would carve out that prosecutions, no matter what, would be determined on the weight of the evidence, and not because somebody in power, not because somebody has political influence, not because a policeman would sit and talk about coordinates that he does not know of. Prosecutions must be based on the evidence. And not only the evidence, but the evidence looked at and weighed in with the law. So that is what we expect. Because we need to see a distinguishing factor, going back to the topic, between justice, power, and public opinion. What is determining the outcome of this case? Is it power? Is it public opinion? Or is it the evidence that falls under the square of justice delivery system? What would determine the end matter of this case? If there was no public opinion, if there was no Dr. Omar Malmo, if there was no JS lawyer Lamin J. Dabo, would Usenu have been convicted along with his sister on the weight of an inconsistent evidence? Would Usenu Dabo have been convicted on the weight of power? Because the president had intervened in this investigation by giving out a bounty that we have never seen occurred in the history of Gambia. People have died.
They,
What
they
was the
actually called it
interest?
an act of terror, and that is there to scare the
So
government or something.
we will see tomorrow whether this would be a landmark ruling that would shape the justice delivery system of the Gambia forever. So we're looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to having you on whichever platform, Dr. Omar Malmo, to really dissect the evidence tomorrow.
We will come back here. We will come back here.
We definitely need to really look at the evidence and go back from scratch, from day one, with the press release, the errors, the mistakes. But I believe also that Justice Jaite's ruling will also set a tone for the police. And it will prevent the police, and they would have learned from premature press releases. Premature press releases where the weight of evidence was not tested. A good prosecutor, a good investigator would test the weight of the evidence before it sets foot in a court of law.
Yeah.
You must be convinced that your evidence would speak for you before you test it in a court of law. If not, doing so would be an abuse of power, would be wasted resources. And I dare say this is what economic crime would be.
Indeed.
I know you've read both the response on points of law from J Dabo and of course Counsel Silla, who is defending Ami. Just as my final question, what is your assessment or take on their responses to whatever that was put up by the state in concluding this case?
Brilliant, top notch, flawless. They could have said nothing better than what they have said. That was looking at the law raw. It was bringing the court's attention to what the law is, to what is prescribed by law, and showing the failure woefully of the prosecution. Woefully. And that is what they did. They had already executed that in their defense. But what they did was to craft it in writing and delivering it in court to show that indeed Usenu Bojang and his sister is not responsible for the killing of the cops. And trust me,
To conclude on that, I saw from the prosecution side and in what they put up, and they said, of course, the exhibit 13 and whatever number, which has to do with the telephone conversations that, the lady from the UK presented to the court, said, oh, it could be possible that, Usenu's phone was with somebody else while the crime was being committed. But that was never
it is
challenged in
impossible. It
court.
is
So
impossible. In fact, hang on, Omar, before I
I just
forget.
wanted to ask on assumption. Should the court rely on the assumptions of the prosecution?
Listen. Forget about assumptions. The prosecution's case I am not even going to touch on the assumption of the prosecution in their closing arguments. The prosecution's initial case in the summary of facts in prosecuting Usenu was that this mobile phone was with the police. It was with Usenu as he murdered those two innocent men. There were coordinates that was plotting this phone. The police press release in evidence. Now, the fact that the prosecution would now come to say that it is possible that somebody else was using Usenu's phone, it is not for the defense to prove. It is for the prosecution in their case, in prosecuting Usenu, to have demonstrated to the court that indeed somebody else was using Usenu's phone. Assumption is one thing, but it is their responsibility, it is their case. Remember, in civil matters, the burden will shift. The burden of proof in civil matters would shift in some instances. In the prosecution's case, in a criminal case, the burden does not shift. The burden remains squarely with the prosecution. And that is why you have the bit about keeping silence. You need not say anything, because whatever you say might be used against you. The burden remained with the prosecution. Usenu could have gone to court and kept his mouth shut and not utter a word. If you say there's a probability that somebody else was using Usenu's phone, it is your responsibility to bring it before the court to determine that indeed somebody was using Usenu's phone. And they did not do that. In fact, that should not have arisen in their closing arguments, because that was an argument that went against them. Because it brought out a loophole in their case. If you are making an assumption of such nature in your closing argument, what did you do in the evidence that you led to show that somebody else was using Usenu's phone? Is it a game of Ludo? Is it for Justice Jaita to be checking whether it is 6 or 5 or 4? How ludicrous.
Incredible contribution, Melvin, over there. We have had almost over 100 people following us right now. Consider subscribing to our channel and share the program if you love what we do here. Melvin, we have like 5 minutes to go, and then you have done justice to the topics that has been put forward here. But I have to ask you this question before I let you go. You've spoken about the inconsistency of an individual who has been indicted by the report of the National Assembly, and this is Batambidu. The reason why I'm putting forward this is the second you know issue that you have raised, and then at the same time you have been vindicated. When you've had the commission indicted Batambidu, and then for him to be investigated for economic crimes, what comes to your mind?
Simple. I've been vindicated. That's what came to my mind.
Hmm.
And the reason why I felt that way is because in my lifetime, I have seen, as a matter of fact, that Batambedu was dished out a taste of his own medicine. And I believe, in retrospect, wherever he is, he would begin to understand that the presumption of heretical.
You're good, you are fine. Yeah.
I hope he would understand that the presumption of innocence is not theoretical, but rather a fundamental principle to be upheld in justice delivery system. I hope also he would understand that in this world, a day can be like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years can be like a day. I have said, and that has been my position, that if you would deem an innocent man before the law that has not been convicted by a court of competent jurisdiction, you would initiate a high level police investigation at the height of a commissioner of police with other commissioners to look into baseless allegations that were never ever corroborated nor substantiated on social media. And not only that, but to go out and issue a press release on the basis of social media allegations that were neither corroborated nor had even been actualized by formal complaint. What you have intrinsically done is to take away the presumption of innocence, wrapping it up in political activism, giving it a clout of social media propaganda to have public opinion determine the weight of the evidence. And what has happened, ironically, is that Batambedu has experienced this in its truest form in his lifetime. Whether he is innocent or guilty, for the rest of his life, he will be marred by the fraudulent activities that have been deemed to have happened within the Jammeh Commission and the disposal of the assets of former President Jammeh. Now, vindicated in the fact that my stance was and always is, Batambedu had set the yardstick where the presumption of innocence was butchered and murdered, and therefore he cannot avail himself with that same yardstick. That was my position. It still is my position, and it will be my position forever.
Thank you so much, Melvin Robertson Robert. We are deeply happy to have you here on podcast. And then we've been, looking forward to have you here quite a long time. And then I believe this is not going to be your last time to appear on this platform. And then we hope and pray that we have you a couple of weeks time to have another discussion, probably on politics and then other social issues, whereby we'll be unpacking so many issues that are actually happening in the Gambia. Election is coming. We have a couple of months to go, and then we would love to have your opinion with regards to the political ecosystem in the Gambia. And then to our viewers too, we are really glad to have all of you here from the starting of the program to the end. You have been very consistent despite it is a bit late back home. I think it's around 10 in the Gambia, but you have stick to the program, to the end. And then, for those of you who are on YouTube too, consider subscribing and share this program. And, we really love what you guys have been doing. Melvin, what will be your last statement for today?
Just to say thank you. It has been a very engaging program. You have been a wonderful host. You made my job very easy. You understand the facts. You understand your questions were very substantive, and it was very educational. I learned from you, and I'm sure maybe you learned a thing or two from me. The same with Omar, and it was very engaging, very interesting. All I would say is that public opinion can never ever take the place of justice delivery. Justice is justice. Power is power. Public opinion is public opinion. But neither can be used to replace the other. Justice will always be justice. And public opinion can never ever determine what justice would eventually be. So in the final analysis, we should always allow for justice to take its course, albeit slowly, obstinately, but eventually by the weight of the evidence, and by fair hearing, and by respect for the rule of law. So thank you once again for having me on your program, and it was a very interesting program, and I hope people have learned and be able to know the distinguishing factors between justice, power, and public opinion. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Melvin, for having you.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.